So it's 8:15. And I'd like to call the Whatcom County Public Utility District Number 1 meeting to order. The first item on our agenda on this messy morning is our Pledge of Allegiance. So all stand, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next item on our agenda is to approve the agenda. Are there any modifications or changes to the agenda anyone would like to propose?
No, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion carries. So the first item on our agenda is our consent agenda, which is our minutes of the regular meeting of January 10th and our claims for this meeting. Is there any?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. We have two public comment periods. The first one is now. If you have an interest in addressing the commission, please raise your hand if you're participating online. Okay. I see Eric's name there, and please go ahead.
Thank you, Atul. As some of you know, I've been encouraging WIRA-1 participants to seriously consider water use efficiency for several years now. Although the Watershed Management Board and others have funded many projects in water supply and storage, the third leg of the stool, efficiency, has never been explored in Whatcom County. Climate change is negatively affecting both water supply and demand. Therefore, we need to carefully examine all the available options to reduce the growing imbalance between declining supplies and growing demand. I encourage the PUD, working with the board, the Whatcom Conservation District, Whatcom County, the Watershed Improvement Districts, and others, to conduct two projects, both focused on agricultural irrigation. I emphasize irrigation because it accounts for almost 3/4 of total summer water use, at the time that salmon and other wildlife most need cold, clear, and abundant in-stream flows. First, based on experiences in other parts of the Western United States, explore the options for improving efficiency in ag irrigation in WIRA-1. Second, conduct pilot programs with some farmers to document and demonstrate the effects of improved irrigation technologies and maintenance and scheduling practices. Perhaps it would make sense for the PUD to start with its own irrigation customers. My optimism about the benefits of efficiency is based on 3+ decades working on energy efficiency. I believe the studies I proposed here will show that water use efficiency is generally inexpensive, cost-effective, that is cheap in terms of dollars per acre foot, requires no regulatory permits, can be applied in all the WIRA-1 subbasins, and is scalable up or down. And I am glad to help in any efforts in this area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. Hang on for a second, Eric. Are
Sure.
there any other public comments online? And so I'd just like to see if the commission would like to discuss the subject of water use efficiency at all at this time. Any questions for Eric? Because he has been this champion of this subject for a long time.
Steve and I had a meeting with Eric last week, and I think I can talk a little bit about that during the commissioner report, or maybe we could get Steve on a future agenda to talk about some of the thinking he's been doing around this. Does that sound like a good
Sounds like a
idea?
great plan.
Okay.
So Eric, stay tuned. We'll get back to you as things develop and we respond to this issue. One of the things that you've also talked to me about is energy efficiency as a template for water efficiency. And I'll just be clear that one of the challenges is that when we have a community that's in most of the country is used to paying almost nothing for water. It's hard to motivate water efficiency, just like with energy efficiency. Why there's so much more energy efficiency in Europe compared to the United States is because the price of energy is much higher in Europe. So I just don't need a response from you on that point, but it's just one of the challenges that I'm thinking about.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
So let's move on to old business.
So I'd like to give a quick update on the broadband program. The highlight of the last couple of weeks since we last met was the submission of our grant application on January 17th. And I'd like to call on Andrew, and he was going to share his screen and kind of walk us through what our grant application looks like and have a little discussion for what it means in the next steps. Hi,
Thanks,
Andrew.
Chris. Good morning, commissioners. Chris is right. Yep, the application cycle opened on November 22nd and closed January 17th. And we were able to put together 3 applications and to the tune of just over $8.1 million in terms of our total request. And they're all fiber to the premise.
Andrew,
Yes.
Andrew, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yes, please.
Andrew says we a lot. This was really Andrew's effort. And the we were people who ran interference so Andrew could actually get all the work done. So, I mean, credit where credit's due. This guy has done monumental work for the district. And yes, it was a team effort, but you know, like I said, the rest of us ran interference and Andrew did all the work. So
Sorry,
thank you,
Andrew's using the royal we then.
well, he's trying to be gracious. And this is one of those times where I just got to say, this guy did 95% of the work and he deserves 95% of the credit.
Thanks, Chris. But yeah, these will be fiber to the premise builds, open access, delivering gig services, and we're targeting for less than $100 a month for the end user. And in total of the 3 projects, we're at just over 2,300 end users that we'd be serving. I'll share my screen here so we can go through the projects here just in high level detail. So this is the first of the 3 projects, Point Roberts, and our committed private partner. There's actually 2, PointNet and Pogo Zone. So these 2 providers said if we get funded and we build the infrastructure, they're willing to deliver services and content over that infrastructure. And this one here is just over 1,200 locations, and it's about $3.5 million to build this out. And we have matching dollars secured from the county. So a big shout out to the county and their support for providing the 10% match.
So about $3,000 per location.
Right. The second project is Glacier, those HOA communities out there just as you arrive to the National Forest as you're heading out to Mount Baker. And this is almost 1,100 locations. Construction costs are coming in at just over $4.1 million. And Ziply is our committed private partner on this. And they have actually decided to provide the 10% cash match for this project. So we went to the county and only asked for a match for the matching dollars for the Point Roberts build. For the other 2 projects, the committed private partners have actually committed to put up the 10%, which is huge. In my previous life, it was, you know, you go to these providers and you say, you know, we have the 10% match, and we just need you to say, if we get this built, you'll deliver services with these kind of high level terms. And we've never approached them with, you know, we need you to, 1, commit to delivering services over this, but also we need 10% match. And so I think that's a big deal. I'm really excited about the partnership with Ziply on this particular project. And I think that shows their commitment to serving our community. The last is the Ravencrest. This is an interesting project because if you look at the new updated fabric, it's called the fabric data or the National Broadband Serviceable Location data set. This entire area shows that everyone is served with fiber to the premise. And what we know is that that's not true. And what we do know is that there's many of these similar projects all over the community. And what we'd like to do is what we've done is we put this application together into the state broadband office to show them that there's case studies just like this, this being the first of many to come. And so $472,000 to serve 13 locations. Like I said, fiber to the premise, and our committed private partner is Pogo Zone for this. So they, again, just like Ziply, have put up the 10% match for this project, which I'm really excited about. Those are our 3 projects. We won't know about the awards until the end of February, which is on their website, and under the guideline, the Notice of Funding Opportunity Guidelines states that we'll find out the awards on February 28th. But the timeline for that could very well go beyond that. But as of now, that's what they've stated. So, and our timeline for these projects is we'd hope to, to break ground this year and wrap up by the end of 2024, but we have until the till the end of October 2026 to get everything finalized. But we're trying to take a more aggressive timeline to get this built out in a timely fashion. So those are our 3 projects. I'm happy to take any questions, but I'll kick it back over to Chris.
I just want to say this was in line with the 3 basic principles that we have. First, that it be open access. Second, that it be owned by the public to perpetuity, or until there's a vote of the people to get rid of the asset. And third was, I had these down. John's smiling at me.
Open
I'm
access,
drawing a blank.
gig services.
Gig services,
and
there we go.
affordability.
The
That was third
affordability
one,
issue,
too.
yes.
Yeah.
So we complied with all 3 of those in our grant applications.
Well, that's just excellent. Any questions from the commission?
No, I think that Chris actually answered my question that was on ownership. I keep hearing fears from people that we would transfer ownership to providers after
Yeah,
a
so
certain number of years.
let me make this clear. There's a legislative difference in how we were created versus the ports.
Mhm.
And the ports have the ability to sell any asset kind of anytime. We do not. Once we establish an asset for utility purpose, to exit that utility purpose would require a vote of the people. So, my assumption is we wouldn't do that. And it's good and it's bad. I think the good, we all see that, the whole thing about control to perpetuity, and we got to say and how it's used and all that. The bad is this, and you guys need to think about this. At the end of the life of the asset, we have to replace it. And that means that we're going to have to collect funds through some kind of depreciation schedule and establishing a reserve, so that when you need to replace the asset, or when you need to pay for the pole replacements that the asset is attached to an overhead, or relocation if you're out on a road and you're underground, you need to have money available for that. And it has to be inside the fund that we're using, which is the telecom fund. So what the port has done is they've said, look, we think the asset's going to last 25, 30 years. At the end of it, it's somebody else's problem. And we're going to rely on the marketplace to provide competitive, cost-effective options. Then the whole purpose behind these loans was, or these grants, was to get the market started in these areas which currently are non-competitive. So at the end of the day, private enterprise could serve these locations. So the whole thing about, oh, it's public ownership forever, that's good, and private ownership is bad, that's not true. They're simply choices, and you end up with different outcomes depending on which one you take. So for us, the challenge is going to be, all right, we own this asset to perpetuity, we better make it run to perpetuity. And that means that we have to continually invest in it and keep it up. Fortunately for us, that's what utilities do. We're in the asset and asset preservation business. So we know how to do that. It just takes a little forethought. You've got my commitment. We're on that trail.
And our rates need to reflect that.
Absolutely.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah,
What about affordability in terms of the price to the end user. Can you just speak to that at all, Andrew?
Well,
Yes,
we're gonna have to,
go ahead, Chris.
but I was just gonna say, we're gonna have to negotiate a irrevocable right of use in IRU
Yeah.
with the end user, and all those details will be negotiated in that. But these guys have signed on with the idea that it's gonna be less than $100 a month for gig service. They've
Okay.
agreed that that's a reasonable
Okay.
first ask.
Okay, that's.
Again, we've got to negotiate it.
And right now we're waiting, if we win the grant, that's when we would then.
Negotiate
finalize
the IRUs. Yeah.
Right, okay.
Now, the other thing is that when you see these numbers where internet service providers are quoting very large amounts to hook up an individual residence, that's usually that final mile to the side of the house. We're taking care of that in the grant. So literally what the ISP has to do is splice out the fiber at the home and install the box. Which is it's about as small a charge, as small of an investment as you can ask of an ISP at that point.
Thanks, that answers my question.
So, what's our feeling about challenges to our applications? And I'm curious if there's any things that we're foreseeing, and then secondly, what are we doing between now and when we hear back from the state regarding managing potential challenges?
So the challenge period opened essentially the day that they were filed. And I believe it closes mid-February, Andrew?
February 10th.
Okay. And so on the fabric data, when you look at the Ravencrest area, the ISP that it shows serves them with fiber is the ISP that is our partner. So the most likely challenge is coming from somebody who's already said they want to be part of the process. So I would say on that one, the most likely challenge is mitigated completely by how we've approached this thing in the first place. On the Glacier related one, again, the ISP that we're extending off of is the ISP that's already resident in Glacier. They're in favor of this. So I would think that the most telling conflict or would be from them. And so, you know, we're getting around that. Now, on the Point Roberts, there are 3 ISPs that are interested in there. And Island Tel is the one that, or Whidbey Tel, I'm sorry, is the one that's up there now. And they might challenge it just saying, hey, that's our service territory and we don't like what you're doing. And then we'll have to find out how the challenge process goes once we've got a challenge.
And the second question I had was about the cost per pass. I think it was about 30 for the first one, the Point Roberts, and about 40 for Ravencrest. 40,000, sorry.
About 4,000.
4,000, sorry, not 40,000. And do you know what it is for the Glacier one approximately?
Well, for the Glacier, it's about 4,000.
It is too, okay.
Yeah, for the Ravenscrest, it's much higher.
Yeah.
The
Wasn't it about
17.
4,000?
It was
It was
about
40,000.
well, customers, so it's
Yeah, so
somewhere around
40,000.
25,
Yeah. Okay.
about 25,000 per
25,000, okay.
pass.
All right,
So
okay.
that one is much higher. I mean, and that's exactly
That's
why
what
the
you would expect.
ISPs don't go there.
Yeah.
It costs too much.
Mhm.
And, you know, so, you know, all that being said, that if we don't get the grant, in any of these 3 grants, we do have plan Bs available. So, you know, we've got the possibility of doing LUDs. We've got going after the county. They have money sitting, literally just sitting there that could be used for telecom grants directly. And then we've got the BEAD grants coming from the federal government. We've got next year, we believe, will be another round of WISBO grants. So, you know, this is the first ask, not the last.
We've lost connection. Do we need to stop the meeting?
I don't think we may have here. I'm not sure if they can hear us. Hands run back to check.
Okay, well, and
We'll just take a pause.
I can hear you just fine.
okay,
So
great.
they're still hearing us, so we can
Okay,
keep
great.
going.
So that's really, yeah, and I'm wondering how much the cost per pass is a factor in deciding the scoring of a particular application.
Well, So there's some objective scoring criteria, and the cost per pass is one of them. And I can't remember, it's like 10%.
Okay,
It's not the biggest one. That being said, I would expect that there'll be additional scoring criteria. For instance, if there's a county that had not received any funding and they applied, even if their project wasn't as competitive, they may say, oh, wait a minute.
we haven't
No.
served this county.
Exactly. So, we could say, yeah, this is how we think it'll score out and all that. And at the end of the day, the state's got to make what they consider to be the best choices, and that may not be purely objective.
What I like about our application then is that it's got all of the different projects have a different attributes to them.
Yep.
And so we'll learn a lot from our applications and how they're received, especially if we get asked for feedback.
Yeah, and I just got to say that in terms of what we think will be the scoring, it's possible that our projects, with the exception of Ravenscrest, score higher than the Ports project that they're submitting. And that's not a good thing, because the Ports project actually serves more of the underserved and economically disadvantaged areas than our projects do. This is truly the next tier of projects. And, my statement to the county council was correct, and I would share it with our commission here and the public and the state if they asked. And that's that, if you're going to fund Whatcom County, I say fund us both, fund both these projects. I think they're all good projects. If you can only fund one, you should fund the Ports, because that really serves a more underserved community, if you will. And we're the next layer of the onion. And then, once we get through this, we'll unmask another layer of the onion. That's how you get there.
Correct.
We probably have about 20,000 unserved or underserved customers in the county, out of we think between 80 and 100,000 endpoints, depending on whether or not you count businesses, and it depends on how you count it, but about 88,000 or so residential endpoints. So we'll get there. It'll take a little while, but we will get there.
So we ready to move on?
Thank you for all your hard work, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew.
Of course, thank you all.
Let's move on to let's move on to new business. The first item on the agenda is resolution 828 to cancel and reissue a warrant. Is that Tracy?
That is me. Is this on? Okay. That was just a vendor number mix up on my part. And so instead of the check going to Whatcom County Planning, it's going to Whatcom County Finance. And that was in the claims this morning to reissue.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 828.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Next item on the agenda is 6B.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. The next item on the agenda is to approve amendment number 1 to Exhibit A to the interlocal agreement with the PUD and Jefferson County.
Brian Walters is the guest host for this segment of our show.
Okay.
Good morning, commissioners.
Morning.
We've had this topic on the agenda several times in the past, and we've done several transfers in the past, but the action before you today is a staff recommendation to approve a transfer of $100,000 of our Bonneville EEI budget to Jefferson County PUD so they can do additional energy efficiency work before the end of the Bonneville fiscal year. It's that time of year, we're getting near the end of the 2-year Bonneville rate period, and several of the utilities have exhausted their funds for doing energy efficiency work for their customers or with their customers. And Jefferson is one of those utilities. They've got quite a robust program for their residential commercial customers, and they need additional budget to complete work in this fiscal year. If the transfer of the $100,000 from our budget is approved by the commission, we'll still have $160,000 of budget left for any energy efficiency work we did between now and September 30th of this year. At which time, as you will remember, that we'll get an additional budget allocation from Bonneville for the next 2-year rate period. So if we don't use any of the 160,000 that we would have left, we can still transfer 50,000 of that budget into the next budget cycle and add it to the Bonneville allocation. So I'm anticipating we'll have the next 2-year period, again, over $500,000 to offset the costs of energy efficiency projects that either our customer, Phillips 66 undertakes, or we undertake for energy reductions associated with our system. So with that, I'll stop and see if there's any questions.
Okay, Brian, you got off scot-free today. Well, with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve amendment number 1 to Exhibit A.
I guess I just have one, I mean, we might as well, I just would say, I mean, it's always worth saying, if there's any possibilities with Blaine or Sumas to keep some of this money local. I guess it's always just worth saying it one more time, but I also think supporting our
Jefferson.
sister PUD at Jefferson County is a pretty worthwhile use of the funds. And you said there's 160,000 left if we find projects between now and the end of the.
Yeah, so I asked that same question of
Yeah.
Brian the first time this came up.
Yeah.
And he always looks Blaine Sumas first.
Yeah.
And then is there, somebody more local, and then just make sure it goes to a sister PUD.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it works. The only way we can use this is for energy efficiency at Phillips. So the other thing I've asked him is, hey, how about doing energy efficiency here in our plant? We can't. These funds are not applicable to that. We've got to use it for one of our retail or wholesale customers, not our own internal efficiency. So those are questions that I asked, and he's answered.
Chris, I'm afraid I have to correct you on that. We can use it. Anything that reduces our purchase of Bonneville power supply qualifies. So we have used
Corrected then.
We have used the funds in the past for energy efficiency improvements at our plant. We've done lighting projects, we've done efficiency improvements that reduced our pump energy for the water system. So yeah, it either way, we can consider ourselves our own customer in that case. So.
Okay.
But we've considered all of those possibilities, and we don't have any potential projects at this time.
Currently not. We have some of the high pipeline we've discussed with Phillips 66. We implemented one with Phillips 66 in which we received substantial funding from Bonneville for that was about $160,000 in incentive funds from Bonneville within this rate period. But currently, we don't have anything identified for the remainder of this fiscal year.
Okay.
One thing I explored some years ago was the inline hydro recovery on our water system lines. And Brian, you had some meetings with some vendors on the subject. And we weren't able to identify a customer for the power that would be produced from that inline hydro system, but could that inline hydro system be funded through the Bonneville? Did you find out about that?
Only indirectly. Bonneville a number of years ago changed their program parameters and took renewables out of the mix. So it has to be an energy efficiency project. However, when we do this project, especially custom projects that aren't typical like rebates for lighting or something, our utility can receive an administrative sort of an incentive to cover our costs associated with the project. And so we have on a couple occasions applied for and gotten the administrative incentive from Bonneville, which is on top of the cost of the efficiency project. And so we do have a pot of money that we've been trying to build up so we can do projects such as you're suggesting, Commissioner. You know, because we can use those funds any way we want. There's no constraint on those funds that we get for administration.
The new generation is not able to be funded through this program, but
Not
energy,
directly.
yeah, to deliver the same function, more efficient ways to deliver the same function is what this money is targeting.
Correct. Energy efficiency improvements.
So like the variable speed drives that we installed at our plants, we receive funding for.
Those
from
can
Bonneville on
qualify.
that.
Yep. All we have to do, it gets a little complicated. We have to run system models, flow models on our system to determine what, the potential reduction in energy use is for those VFDs. But yes, we've used those in the past.
Okay, we have gotten that money in the past for that purpose, yeah.
Correct.
And as part of our plant one rebuild, there's going to be more variable speed drives, but when it's a brand new rebuild, it may not be suitable for this funding.
Brand new
Right? Because it's all-
rebuild. We look at, typically what you do in with the rebuilds or construction of a new plant is we look at the state energy efficiency standards and requirements. And if we implement a measure that exceeds the state standards, then we can get a reimbursement based on the difference.
So it occurred to me that maybe and I'm sure this is on both of your minds. So, but I guess that's kind of why I'm here to ask again, things that you might be considering. So, in working with the design engineers for the plant one rebuild, let's try to maximize the amount of Bonneville money we utilize in terms of pushing the envelope on energy efficiency in the design. I'm guessing that's in your thinking already, but just reinforcing that.
It is, and an interesting thing we've discovered, because it kind of went under the radar, is that the state implemented new energy efficiency standards for both residential and commercial structures. And so when we rebuild water plant number one, we will be required to have a certain amount of renewable energy production associated with that plant. They're actually speccing, solar is one of those options that we'd have to have a certain percentage relative to the square footage of the structure. So not only are we considering it, it will be mandated for our new plant.
But I really like that idea. If there's ways that, it sounds like going above and beyond the standards is potentially going to be hard, but if there's ways that we can, and we can use some of these EEI funds for that, that would be great. I mean, we've had this conversation many times, so I think that, how we feel about this issue, Brian, but I, of course, am happy to support a sister PUD to help them with their energy efficiency. So I can make a motion unless, okay. So I'll make a motion to approve amendment number 1 for an interlocal agreement with PUD number 1 of Jefferson County.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank
The
you,
next item
Commissioner.
on their agenda.
Thanks,
Thank you, Brian. The next item on our agenda is 6C, to approve the First Amendment to the employee agreement with the general manager. I like the First Amendment. Are you asking for free speech clause?
Exactly.
I have no expectation of free speech. This is a place of business.
So Chris may help me out on this. Peter in our office worked on this. They really came up with or Ann could help me. She was involved with this too, but there were some inconsistencies and clarity sought with regard to some of the vacation scheduling. You remember that when Chris came on board, there was 5 weeks And then what was going to be the vacation schedule after that. This is provide some clarity that it was 4 weeks, which I think was the intention. That was the second amendment. The first one being the salary adjustment. With the CPI adjustment for this year, given the inflation rates, it could have been higher, 8.3. Steve, actually, I think Chris had said, let's go 7.5, which I believe is the employees.
Well, actually, the employees got the higher.
To hire, and so Chris said, let's set it at 7.5 this year. And then it'll be reviewed annually or adjusted to the market rate based upon that CPI in the future. So a little bit less than what the CPI would have been. That was his request to have that set in this First Amendment. So that's the summary. I think I captured it.
Any comments from the commission? Questions?
I'll make a motion to approve the First Amendment to employee agreement with General Manager Chris Heimgartner.
Second.
There's a motion, a second. And I'd like to say one thing that I think Mike Murphy would applaud this. And, you know, he was a real champ. He is a real champion for the salaries structure, you know, valuing everybody, and in no way does this value you less. So I just wanted to be clear. It increases my appreciation of you and your approach as a general manager. So as a motion, a second, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Let's move on to 6D, which is resolution number 829, reappointing Schmelik, Sitkin, and Davis as our commission's general counsel.
So this one is mine, and you know, we had initially talked about several things. One of which was how is John and his organization doing for us? You know, so that it's kind of that performance evaluation component. My conclusion is they're doing very, very well for us, and they're helping us in a number of places. It is absolutely hurting cats, and they're doing a good job, especially on the adjudication issue. But if you think about all of the cats and dogs issues that we bring to them to look at every single week, and you know, I have a great appreciation for both the timeliness and the quality of the product. The second thing is in terms of cost, and I found it to be very appropriate when I got here. I'm not going to say a steal or a bargain, but I think it was a really, really, really good value. And occasionally law firms have to look at what they charge, and John's feet, I think, are being held to the fire because he has cut us a good deal for a long time. And so this does two things. It reaffirms the contract with John's firm, and it also adjusts the rate to bring it a little bit more in line with what they charge other municipal customers. So with that, I'd like to, John, is there anything substantial I missed?
I just would say, you know, we always serve the pleasure of the commission, and our contracts provide you can terminate us at any time. So it's not a binding 2 years for you, but you do a 2-year appointment. We typically review and adjust our rates every 2 years. We held off during COVID and the pandemic. Historically, PUD has dragged behind the other municipal governments on the rate increases, but we're bringing you in line at the same time with the other municipal entities that just have had the contracts renewed in December, and this was put into January.
Any questions, comments from the commission?
I don't have any questions at this time.
I'll entertain a motion to approve resolution number 829 for the reappointment of our legal counsel.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 829.
I'll second.
And there's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you. Let's move on to the general manager's report.
So I've got a few things to talk you guys through. First is not quite the final update, but nearly the final update on the John Humphreys public records request. That request is now closed. I would characterize it as abandonment. John didn't even open up the last couple of files, and Our legal counsel advised that is now closed. There'll probably be some tidying up bills to finish it off, but it's substantially done at a little bit over $50,000. So that I'm glad to report. You probably won't hear any more reports on that from me. Second thing I want to talk about is our Water 201 course that we were going to have. Now, remember, the first half was on kind of water policy and maybe a little bit on the physics of hydrology to begin with. The second half is going to be the nuts and bolts. Here's what we do as a water utility. What I'd like to do is have kind of a two-part meeting. One would be a relatively short classroom where we actually go through, here's how a water plant's designed, here's how it works, here's how a water transmission and distribution system is designed and works, and kind of the operating issues. The second part would be then to walk you through plant 2. And you know, this is the flocculation tank. This is what we do. This is where we add stuff, and here's what that looks like. So I would propose to do this on a non-commission meeting day sometime in late February, and there's no magic to that. It's just we're trying to get it out where we're likely to have a dry day, or more likely to have a dry day. And if you guys settle on a date and something that works, we can obviously we'll take care of all the public notice and everything else. It'll be a public meeting. So I would propose any date that works for you guys in late February, and I'm at your pleasure on how to decide that.
So the calendar, commissioners want to pull out your calendars now?
Yeah, that works for me.
Oh, Lord.
So
Back when you said, I'm just going to grab my calendar as well. I hate to say yes, and then we have a no.
And been studying my calendar for the week of February 20th, and I know I have quite a bit available that week, but not for the last week. I mean, not for the last day or so, because February is a short month.
yeah, right.
Monday is the 20th, and so the following week it's Monday and Tuesday, and I think our commission meetings are on the
So the 28th.
14th and 28th.
The 23rd of February would work for me.
It would be Thursday, right?
Yes.
I can make that work also.
It works for me, I know that.
The morning would be better than the afternoon. Although, actually, I'm pretty flexible.
Being in the 23rd.
February 23rd?
Yeah,
Well, how long do we need?
probably about 2 hours, I'm thinking.
Okay.
Wait a second, to physically visit and to do an in-room thing? Is
Mhm.
2 hours enough time?
I think it depends on the questions you have, but yeah,
Okay.
I mean, and there's, you know, people can dump tons of information on me, and I know after about 2 hours, I'm full.
Yeah.
So we could, you know, if you need another one afterwards, if you guys have a whole bunch of follow-up questions, schedule another one.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, I can do the 23rd, either like in the morning, like 8:15, or then after 3:30.
After 3:30 is probably too late for the plant operators.
Yeah,
Does the 23rd work for you?
it does.
Okay.
I like morning better, but
So,
I
yeah,
can do either.
the
Let's
morning,
do morning.
8:15 would work for me.
Sounds good.
So we're doing 8:15 on February 23rd.
Yep. I'll write that down. Since I wrote my calendar.
All right, and so I'll make sure that we have appropriate public notice and all of that in advance, but that should be fun.
Excellent.
Maybe I'm, but I enjoy that kind of thing. Just a little notice on our feasibility study, our electric feasibility study. That's been delayed a little bit with our contractors, so I don't expect to see it till the end of the month. So another week and a half. I'll just keep you posted on that as it becomes available. Also, we plan to, we're looking at installing solar panels here on this facility. And we should have an update for you available the second meeting in February. And that'll be, you know, what we found and sources of funding, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We'll chase all that stuff down by then. Let's see. Oh, the last thing I've got. So the Mount Baker ski area has approached the port, wanted to know about, what was the possibility of electrifying. And we'll be meeting with them today at 1 o'clock. So I'll go down to the port office and we'll have a chat.
That's very interesting to me. I go way back with that discussion with Mount Baker Ski because one of the grandkids of the originators in ski area, and I approached me years and years ago about when I was in the biodiesel business about running there, and I told him no. Well, because of the gel point of biodiesel. Diesel's already a challenge. But I didn't want to, didn't think that was a good matchup. But then later on, we talked about the potential, by the way, of renewable diesel. And it's not just the attributes that matter. One of the reasons that ski areas care a lot about their use of diesel is because there is a fine particulate black carbon that comes out of the combustion process of diesel generators. And it turns out that as it relates to the albedo effect on snow, it has 1,000 times greater impact than carbon. So it increases the attraction of solar energy to the snow and accelerates melting. And so just wanted to share that. Interesting.
Well aware of the
fact.
phenomenon. Yeah.
Yeah. So and our folks at university, UW people are the ones who, sorry, Rick, are the people who discovered this effect in our region. So it's really exciting to me. Maybe microgrids are a potential option. I don't know. But I'm excited to hear that we're talking to them about it.
Yep, and I'll find out kind of what's their pleasure and what we can do for them, and if anything, and report back to you.
Thank you.
And that's it for my report.
Okay, well, if there's no other questions for the general manager, let's move on to the operations report.
Hello again. I wanted to briefly touch on a subject you were briefed on at the last commission meeting, the frazzle ice situation that we had. And first of all, since I wasn't able to attend that meeting, I'd like to take this opportunity to provide my own shout out to operations crews, not only the water crew, but the electric crew and our technology and IT crew for supporting water operations crew during that period. It was 8 days of a lot of work. Also, I'd like to thank Commissioner Grant, who sent a thank you note to operations crew, and that's much appreciated. Thank you for that. I'd like to touch on just one thing, and we last week had a debrief on the frazzle ice situation that occurred. And we had administrative staff in attendance along with all the operation crews, a discussion of what went on, what we could do better in the future, what measures we might implement to reduce the impact and mitigate, the impact of frazzle ice, high turbidity, etc. And I thought it was a real good meeting. And coming out of it, there's a number of measures that we're going to analyze thoroughly. And, some of them are simple operational changes, tweaks, if you will, to how we prepare for fragile ice condition. And the other are more substantial in terms of capital improvement projects. We're looking at, for water plant 2, putting covers over the settling basins, because we had a lot of trouble there this time of icing and maintaining water flow out of the basins into the clear wells. Plant 1 covers are part of the design for the new plant, so we won't address covers there currently. The other thing is we're taking a hard look, particularly at water plant 2 again, at our intakes and the design of the intake screens. As you're aware, currently our main method to dealing with icing conditions is blow-offs, compressed air blow-offs of those screens to try to force ice and debris off of the screen to maintain water flow into the intakes. Well, it appears based on this recent event, that's not enough. We entered a situation where even blowing off those screens every 60 seconds, we were still getting restricted water flow into the intakes and had to back off on the amount of water that we pumped. So we'll be looking hard at screens and whether other screen designs might work or other applications, warm water jets, whatever, that others have used elsewhere in the country that are dealing with this. So just wanted to bring that to you because we are actively looking at it. You'll see things probably come before you in future meetings that we're planning to do. It may be that, it'll require a movement of money from one project to another in the budget. We won't ask for midterm budget increase, but just maybe we might be shifting money around to cover projects we hadn't anticipated prior to this recent event. So I think with that, I'll stop. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
I'm curious about the screens. What was their function again? The screens are keeping debris out, right?
Well, the screens are,
And fish.
two purposes. The original purpose was they were trash racks. We're trying to keep river debris out of the intakes. But later on, when we did improvements to the intakes, starting in sort of around the turn of the century in the 2000 period, it was fish protection, fish mitigation. We're running about 5 species of salmon, use that river. And so the screens that we put in at plant 2 were put in originally, we have cylindrical screens in plant 2. The design of those screens is to not only keep out debris and to keep out small salmonoids, if you will, but it's to increase the surface area of the screen so we reduce the velocity of the water flowing through the screen so we don't pin fish, trap them against the screen and they can't escape. So that was the original intent. We put those screens in 2001. We refurbished them again in 2009. It's clear based on our analysis that the screens have been doing a great job at mitigating any fish issues, but they're basically inviting frazzle ice buildup on those screens. And so we're going to try to address that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
At the WPUDA meetings, what operators do was discussed a lot at a couple of roundtables that I sat in on. And I'm for sure our PUD, but PUDs all over the state, the kind of conditions that operators, linemen have, expose themselves to. And some of the photographs that commissioners shared, it's just amazing.
We can give you some amazing photos if you want to share, Commissioner, because we've got a bunch.
I would love, I think it would be love, it's wonderful, particularly we have the benefit as commissioners to have these conversations. But our legislators in Olympia could benefit from seeing what the utility community does to keep the lights on. And in our case, it's not exactly keeping the lights on, but it's just a kind of, the visceral experience of working with nature to keep the infrastructure flowing is something that I think our legislators could benefit from being exposed to.
So I just would urge one caution. And that's that they perform 2 different functions. One is legislation, the other is regulation. So anytime you show a picture, you're inviting a new regulation to prevent that behavior, which, I get that. So we've got to be a little
As
careful.
you were aware, at Waputa, there was a long conversation you may participate in as well about adding temperature limits on when
Yes,
operators can
exactly.
be out in the field. And you know,
I know the comment from Berry County where they have such big weather.
yeah,
extremes.
weather extremes
Yeah.
of that.
Basically, they wouldn't be able to do work.
Yeah.
So yeah, that I love to share these photographs, but you know, as soon as they get a copy over to LNI, someone's looking at it with a magnifying glass saying, you know, is every T crossed and I dotted
Right,
in terms
right,
of compliance with the existing regulations? And then how else could we additionally regulate this to make it better? And the regulators don't want to shut our business down. They want to make it better. And sometimes the net effect is it prevents us from doing something that.
Well, I do think though, you know, whether, I always love looking at pictures, but this does make me think too about, and maybe in a future meeting, just getting an update on some of our safety procedures. I know I just took a first aid class over the weekend a little while ago, and I think I felt good about that because, you know, you never know when you might need to do CPR, especially when you have kids beginning to eat solid foods in my case, so knock on wood. But you know, I think we can never, doing those trainings regularly does help all of us make sure we know what to do in emergency situations. So I've never gotten an update on how we do that here, and that might be worth having a conversation on at some point.
Yeah, in fact, that might be a good subject for an operations update at some point.
Yeah,
I'd be happy to do that.
okay.
Kind of big picture, if you take a step back here, one of the things I marvel at this organization as a newcomer, you know, I can look at it and say, wow, this is really something good. One of the pieces of advice that I've received and given over the years is never let a good emergency go to waste. And, you know, what that means in an asset management organization is that after the event, you stand back and say, what could we do differently that would make it go better next time? And, you know, sometimes organizations have a ton of rigor around those after action reports. What I saw here was a bunch of people who got together, sat around a table and said, you know, gosh, this didn't work. How can we fix that? This really went well. This could be different next time in terms of, you know, more frazzle ice or higher wind speeds. You know, a lot of those discussions happen kind of naturally. It didn't take any prodding from me or Brian or anybody else. It just is an organic way that this organization performs. And I just want to, you know, Brian, have a shout out to you and everybody in operations for having that mindset that no matter how good everything went, we could do better next time. And I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to commissioner reports. And would you like to go first?
Sure, I did, I attended a few of the Waputa meetings, via Zoom and, learned some things and was, I'm excited to be going down to Olympia in February for those Waputa meetings and PUD Day on the Hill in person. And just wanted to let everyone know that I'll be doing our February 14th meeting from the Waputa offices. I'm gonna get down there a day early and just spend some time with the staff because I haven't had very much
That's a great idea.
time with them over the last 2 years. So I also got kind of oriented around Energy Northwest, my new role there, and kind of did some just forms and learning a little bit more about the organization. And that first meeting is tomorrow with the board of directors. And Steve, and as I said, Steve and Eric Hurst and I got together to talk about water use efficiency. And Steve's been doing some thinking around what role we could be playing in that space, including pulling up an old conservation district report about water use efficiency, which I haven't had the chance to read yet, but that's been just interesting to me to kind of think about what role we could be playing there. So I've been spending a little bit of time thinking about that, and maybe we can get some time in a future meeting for you to talk about where where that goes, Steve. Just wanted to say, it's been cool to see the updates to the website with the logo, so thanks for everyone doing that. And I would also be interested in just having a conversation in a future meeting about where we think we're headed with social media. And I think we have a real resource too with Commissioner Arnett with social media. And so, you know, I've been kind of talking about this issue for the last 2 years, but I think trying to figure out where how we want to do that in a way that feels authentic to our organization is important. So, you know, I don't think it's urgent, but I do think it is important. So I
I'll
just wanted to bring
chime
that.
in. I know Ann has circulated some policies on my staff and it's sitting on my desk to take a look at.
Okay.
And so as soon as I can get through that, we'll tee that back up.
Okay.
But I came in over the holidays and I just haven't had an opportunity to get to it.
Yeah, and to expand even more than that, last year Ann triggered a survey among WPUDA members to get all of
Right.
their social media and the policies that she wrote up and have circulated to staff and now gone to John. Were kind of the distillation of all the good stuff that we could find in all of that. So Ann, thank you very much. And, yeah, the intent was to get a lot of the stuff lined up and then bring it back to you guys and say, okay, here's what we think.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of put it out there that it's when we can get it on an agenda for a commission meeting and we're ready to have that next step. You know, I think I'm eager to explore where we're going with that.
And I think we're pretty close on that.
Okay. Yeah, so I think that's kind of my critical updates.
So on the subject of, where if I could, I'll ask you about the subject of water use efficiency.
Yeah.
Are there any action items that you identified? On
Can
the
Steve
subject.
jump in for
Yeah,
a second?
yeah.
Okay.
The Commissioners, Eric Hurst has been, as he said earlier, he's been very active in trying to promote looking at water use efficiency in the county for some time. And all the way back to when he participated in our drought resiliency planning process, you know, several years ago. And recently he raised this question to Commissioner Grant, and we attended a meeting with Commissioner Grant and Eric. I think Eric is misplaced some of his comments in terms of nothing's been done and it has not been addressed. And I think that was without quoting exactly what he said, but for some time through the water supply planning process and through a couple of different programs that there's a water use efficiency group in the county that's been active for years, actually as a response on working on water systems, domestic water, potable water systems, and looking at opportunities for water use efficiency in for domestic purposes, cities, water associations, water systems. That group's been very active for a couple of years now. Then he working with the conservation district. The conservation district got a grant about 2 years ago from Whatcom County to look at water use efficiency and irrigation, mainly irrigation, all agricultural uses, but mainly irrigation. And the conservation district completed their study last fall and brought it back to Chris Elder at Whatcom County government to present to the water supply group and agriculture and to the county to take it to the next step. That plan called out very specific recommendations on ideas on irrigation, and they didn't call it water use efficiency and irrigation. They called it agricultural water management, but very specific recommendations to look at. Why that did not get pushed back to the water supply plan group or back to the county, I don't know. I can't tell you. I mean, I've had some conversation with Mr. Elder at the county government, but that's the only response that I received was they had not taken it back for peer review, basically, and then with the recommendation. The final recommendation in that plan called out the hiring of a person at the conservation district, and with a recommendation to get funding for that position at the conservation district. I made a comment to Commissioner Grant about that, and I said, I think that recommendation was, I don't know if it's poorly put, but the second part of funding that position for 1 year was to have that person look at additional grant funds to continue that person's employment at conservation district. And I can tell you from my experience, that idea just does not work. The other part is that it was not taken back to the agricultural community. My understanding is that when the recommendations came out in that report, agricultural community was not interested in pursuing that. As I mentioned to Commissioner Grant, I said that whatever projects move ahead on water use efficiency or water conservation, using less water for agriculture, you have to engage farmers. You have to get the farmers engaged.
So.
And at this point, doesn't seem to be any interest in pursuing any of those kinds of projects that were listed in the recommendations in that report.
Have we reviewed that study? I mean, have we?
No, you haven't
Got a
seen-
copy of the study?
No, you haven't seen it. I
Yeah,
just passed it on to Commissioner Grant. What?
Can you forward it?
Yes, yeah, I can do that.
and does Eric have a copy of it?
I sent that to him too. I had received late, I think it was October or November of last year, I received a draft executive summary, which was basically a 3-page document that was supposedly coming from the conservation district. And when we met with Eric said, well, that project was, the study was never completed. The person that was doing it left the conservation district, that kind of a thing. So I contacted Chris Elder at the county, and he said, well, it was completed. It was completed in December of last year, but it was the county never pursued it. And so I asked for a copy of it, and we received a copy of it last, Friday, and I sent it out.
Great, so that sounds like there's something for us to direct our attention to for the next few months.
I think,
And find, can see there are things in a way we would support and.
I think the key issues here are, number one, if you're talking about conservation, water conservation or water use efficiency in irrigation, I think you have to engage farmers.
Mhm.
I think that's a key piece. The second is that there's an opportunity. If you look at the report and you see 2 or 3 projects that you may want to consider supporting, you have to step back and say, how does all of that fit into all the other work that's being done under the Watershed Management Board? To make sure that you're not just out there, if you would, on your own, saying, I think this is a good idea. I think we should pursue it. So.
Steve, one of the things we've heard from the farmers in discussions over the last year or so is that the unintended consequence of the relinquishment statutes under the water code for the private farmers is that there's the material disincentive for doing any efficiency, because by reducing their water consumption for a 5-year period, they are determined to have relinquished that portion of the water right. So the investment in efficiencies it's disincentivized based upon policy 1060 and 9014.140 with regard to relinquishment. So I just bring that up unless we've heard something different. That's what I've continually heard from the agricultural community, of their reluctance to engage in water use efficiency, is that has an effect on their water rate.
So, I mean, two things for you guys to think about as commissioners here. The first is when you get a chance to read through the report, we may or may not have an advocacy role on
Right.
any of these measures. And you need to think about that. The second thing is, to what extent are any of those recommendations applicable to our few very small irrigation customers? And it may be that we want to take, and do a small pilot with our own customers, but it may not fit. So, we need to kind of look through that. So think about that as the two different appropriate roles. Is, on the one hand, what advocacy role do we want to have with regards to that report and all of the water management committees and reports and efforts and our adjudication? How does it all fit? And then, if we have something in there that really fits with one of our irrigation customers, to what extent do we want to try and help make that happen? So read through the report, have a look at it, and think about it through those two different lenses.
I think too that I totally agree with what Chris just said, and that I also think that sometimes, unless you're fully engaged in the day-to-day watershed management board work programs, all the different projects that we're working on, you don't have a good sense that water use efficiency is and has been discussed. Our water supply plan that we're going to be coming out hopefully by the end of this month with the final phase 2 report includes comments that actually reference Eric Hurst and his suggestions on water use efficiency, and ideas promoting some of the recommendations that are in this draft plan coming from the Conservation District. So there's a lot of consideration. There has been a lot of consideration about those issues and ideas, but as long as we're engaged in the bigger picture in terms of basin-wide watershed management projects, we have to try to figure out how to fit those in, if you would, and make sure that we don't lose the interest in them. So.
Well, and the third phase of the water supply plan, which there's not funding for quite yet, but
Right.
hopefully there will be, is hopefully gonna, drill down to these specific projects that could be piloted, which will hopefully focus on water use efficiency. So I would like to get from a place of, talking about it and putting, having plans about it, to really like, what do these look like in terms of projects? And hopefully that work in the third phase of the water supply plan will really include some meaningful outreach and engagement with the ag community to understand if these are projects that are viable.
The other, I agree. The other, what John mentioned, I mean, the Foster case that we've heard quite a bit about over the last couple of years, that's another impediment to anything to do with trying to use less agricultural water, especially. And as we mentioned to Eric when we met with him, the main focus, I think, on agriculture, the farmers that have legal water rights, let's set aside adjudication. But if we just generally, if we don't consider adjudication, those farmers that have legal water rights for irrigation, their main focus is to use less water. And so they can spread the use of that water on a great number of acres, because it's how many acres that you have in production that really determines the effectiveness and success of that farmer.
Well, thanks, Steve, for getting the discussion going, and we'll keep.
Well, I think it's fair to say that Steve is embedding the questions from the community for a long time. And I think maybe sometimes the advocates in the community may not fully appreciate the degree that their interests have been incorporated into the process, but the process moves slower than most of us would like. So.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. Okay, to me, huh? I attended WAPUDA's new commissioner training this month and attended our legislative reception at the Capitol and went to my first Wakuta board meeting as our voting member, where I think Whatcom County led a pretty spirited discussion about salmon recovery that ended in some amending language for the federal talking points. And it was a great meeting. I also, just back to Commissioner Grant, I do have interest also, in speaking about our communication plan coming up. And after meeting all of the staff, I have some concerns about overburdening staff with a new communication plan and seeing how I can help alleviate some of that if possible. I do have a lot of experience in communications and digital marketing, and I'm happy to lead that. So looking forward to having more discussion about communications and how I can help. That's it for me.
So I've made some bullet points of things I want to share from the meetings I attended. Almost planning to go to the Whatcom meetings. I'll be here for the commission meeting, but then I'll be heading out in the afternoon for meetings in Olympia. But the first thing is for you, Commissioner Grant. Whatcom is this is my bullet points are mostly on energy. Whatcom is planning is currently biased to oppose a measure to increase the percentage of net metering.
That was gonna.
And I asked in follow-up conversations about that. And they were talking about a threat for most PUDs doesn't exist.
Okay.
Is
this 1427?
I don't know the bill number.
Okay.
The point is that there's a allowance up to 4%. And Whatcom is coming out probably in opposition to raising that limit above 4%. The solar industry wants to increase that limit.
Right.
So the most obvious question to me was, where is the level of penetration approaching 4%? It's not that. It's definitely not that in Whatcom County. It's and then I can pretty much say that means for most of the PUDs in the state, it's not an issue. It's an issue for Kittitas PUD, and it's an issue for Opelka.
Right.
It also, Snohomish crossed that 4% line in 2014. So, and there you're talking about a utility that has 400,000 electric customers. So, well, actually 370 some, but 400,000 customers. So it's a really big deal. And net metering, the way it's configured today, is rich customers are being subsidized by poor customers. That's how the money flows. And if you really think that's a good idea, then go for net metering. That's it really is a very inappropriate wealth transfer that was engineered by the solar lobby and perpetuated by them. And if you're against it, on the grounds that you don't like poor people paying for amenities on rich people's homes, then that's really where it comes from.
So I get that your feelings on the subject are to not allow for an increase in the amount of.
And you might sense that I have strong opinions on this one.
Yeah, and I maybe something we can talk about later because I would like to understand this. Obviously, I'm not in embracing a wealth transfer. And I'm definitely not wealthy, and I have solar on my barn. And I would definitely be in the lower income category. So having said that, the thing that I wanted, we've been active on policy discussions. And in that policy discussion subject, I think it would be perhaps something that we should investigate. If we want to. It's really, we don't really have a direct role in this because we're not a residential electricity provider. But I know it's something that you know, you wrote some policy letters and I think they were helpful in the policy discussion on this subject. What I raise is that I'd like to know if it's possible to for these communities to figure out their own solutions. Keep the statewide levels perhaps as it is, because for most PUDs or most communities, it's not an issue. Or the communities where it's above 4%, maybe have special purpose action in those districts where it's happening. So
I'm
anyway.
really glad you brought this up, and I would say there's some different perspectives on the issue of whether
No
it's
doubt.
a wealth transfer and other aspects of our energy system where we're also doing wealth transfers, but there's not opposition to those. You know, so I will probably, I'm gonna try to attend the Thursday legislative session update on the energy stuff, just to listen. I know you're our representative, but
Yeah, sure.
I would like to drill down to understand more
We
about.
tag teamed absolutely at the board meeting. No, yeah.
And I know, I'm glad you brought that. I think it is HB 1427. I think that's an important one to keep our eye on.
Okay. A repeating theme at WPUDA, which I very much am aligned with, is and has been since WPUDA has been in existence, is the idea of local control. It's getting more attention this year, I feel like. And there's two aspects of local control. One is the legislature taking action that indirectly restricts the action of local governments to and PUDs of which are one example of local government to undertake policy actions that are right sized. And then it's the second aspect is the executive department, right? Engaging in rulemaking that does that as well. For example, as it relates to practices on what temperatures workers can work in, not being sensitive to the fact that some PUDs have, you know, just an elevation, you know, extremes on the same day. So anyway, long story short is the issue of local control is really going to continue to be prioritized, and several of the new commissioners talked about how they care a lot about that issue. Another big focus area was grid reliability and the governor's opposition and actually veto of the bill, which was passed unanimously by both houses. To focus on grid reliability, the governor opposed the bill because he said that the measure was redundant. And the bill has been reintroduced. The concern of the governor's office is how do we save face? We vetoed this last time. You know, maybe you admit my thinking is maybe the easiest thing to do is to admit you made a mistake, because we all make mistakes. What's wrong with saying you made a mistake? But I jokingly, I think I had the best joke of the conference. And then my joke was the governor should sign the bill with his left hand.
Right.
Because he did that thing with the broadband, two bills.
It was
Anyway.
interesting to me that they didn't change any of the language at all, except for the dates.
No, but you made the valid point of why not let them save face?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, there's a little bit of and ultimately you want to get your objective accomplished.
Yeah.
So that means that's what politics is.
Mhm.
Sometimes you make some minor tweak to satisfy, yeah.
That's
And
what
I completely agree with you with your
Yeah.
point too, yeah. The energy siting is a focus of WPUD at the federal level. They want to ironically support measures by at the federal regulatory level that create a more streamlined process for transmission infrastructure. Which is actually less local control. Interesting exception. So.
Well, Commissioner, I mean, if I may, that's the problem right now with transmission and energy source siting.
Yeah,
Is that if you give it over to local control, which is where it is, it doesn't happen. And there has to be some point where you say kind of the overriding needs of society are,
right.
and you have some mechanism to do that. We don't have that. And net result is our nation's transmission system is not substantially expanded in 20 years. And, you know, we're going to look to double or triple the throughput on that system in the next 30 to 40 years as we continue to electrify. And a lot of these facilities, you know, the renewable resource facilities are going to be distant from population centers.
Yeah, I don't disagree that at all. And I mean, there has to be national infrastructure of some kinds. I was just recognizing the fact that any principle shouldn't be taken as a religion. You know, local control, yes, but maybe there's some exceptions. I was just, there's more than one case where that happens. There was some side discussion between commissioners. A couple commissioners chatted with me about about the Intelco project and how they heard that it was the power supply agreements were not able to be obtained. And remember, we said we understand that your community wanted the jobs, absolutely, but of course it was unfair to the public power community from their perspective, because as far as PUDs around the state, for them, it's basically providing low-cost power from Bonneville. Then what does that mean? That means that obviously the average price will have to go up for everybody else. So it's math. It's not complicated, and obviously our local officials and including our PD naturally wanted that big project and those jobs, but they're just understanding the other side of the story. You want to add anything to that?
Well, just and I kind of feel sorry for Blue Wolf, but there weren't really any bad guys in this whole thing.
No.
You know, we had good local reasons to want it, and other utilities had good local reasons to oppose it. And Bonneville was caught in the middle, and Congress wasn't going to act. And, you know, there really weren't any bad actors here. We just couldn't make it happen.
So to address the item regarding salmon. So Snake River Dams is back on the federal talking points. I've not been secretive about my thoughts on the subject, that our PUD should stay out of it. It's completely clear to me that the consensus of commissioners at WAPUDA are very pro Snake River Dams, which is fine with me. Everybody should have their opinion, and I support the organization that I belong to, even though sometimes I don't agree with everything they say. However, there was a bullet number 5 in the federal talking points that was completely disingenuous under Snake River Dams. And I raised the issue, even though I'm not a representative, I checked with Commissioner Arnett on it, and raised the issue that the inaccuracy of the statement in bullet number 5. And basically it was something along the lines that do you have it?
I do.
Well, I may read it. Salmon populations have improved. Dam breaching is not proven to be the solution of salmon recovery or the cause of salmon decline. Now, this kind of a statement could be made perhaps for a particular river system or a particular project. But for sure, if you ask the native communities or the fishermen in Washington state, they would not agree with the statement that salmon populations have improved. And WAPUDA has some people with fishing background, some people for sure, but WAPUDA has no right to make a statement on behalf of salmon population. It's totally speaking out of school. And as a matter of fact, even though I'm not a huge fan for the permanent protection of the Snake River Dams, it doesn't serve their interest either, because it's basically a bait for people to say, well, then the whole position is unsubstantiated. And the other positions that are bullets are very much about the utility committee saying how important they are from a utility supply perspective. And so they made some significant changes to that to be more conditional in relating to things that you can't disprove, for example. And I was glad for that. And it was meaningless for Whatcom County, but frankly, but that was the diversion that happened at the board of directors meeting. So I think I've covered. There's some things about our supply, obviously, as we look at our study that regarding municipalization. The big question for me is supply. Where are we going to get the power? In many ways, the Intelco endeavor might have asked some of the relevant questions that would be also help us in figuring out where we get supply as a municipal utility. But I think it's fair to say that is my big concern, and I've been asking lots of questions. I've got lots of follow-ups to do, and I look forward to reporting back to the commission on what I learned on that subject. And I'm talking obviously with Chris on the subject too, and learning a lot from me on that. So thanks for that. I asked about voting, and one of the things that we had a follow-up email exchange on was when do we get to vote in the telecom committee? We probably all know, but just to make sure you all know, we don't currently get to vote in the telecom committee. And the day we get to vote is when we have our first customer. So, as soon as you start charging somebody for money, with some infrastructure, so that could be a year or two off still. Yeah. So, I mean, we could charge somebody for telecom services, I suppose. Then we could be sooner. Regarding water, I'm switching this. So I have two items related to water, and they both have to do with the cost of service assessment, cost of service analysis. I think you're on that meeting. The question that came back, and I don't know if you've already discussed this with Chris, but I'm wondering if we need a cost of service analysis.
We actually have one underway with, and Annette's lead on it, FCS Associates. Yeah, so we're there. She had another meeting with them this week. The report's getting close. So the contract's been underway for, I don't know, 6 or 7 months now. So yeah, every utility should do a COSA periodically.
So you stole my thunder completely, which I'm happy about. And then I was going to say, I talked to several commissioners about which was the outfit that people liked the most, and they said FCS.
Yeah, so I've used, I don't know, half a dozen different firms over the years,
Okay.
and FCS looks like they're really, really good for water, which is where we're leaning on it.
That's my report. Thank you. Glad to hear it. If there's nothing else on commissioner reports, then let's move on to the second public comment period. And I noticed that Whatcom Democrats has left the building. Did they leave a comment?
He sent an email.
Would you
To everybody.
Would you be okay reading that to us? Or is it very long, or?
And then we do
Okay.
have Rick Miracle wants to talk to
Should
us.
we let Rick go first? Rick, would you go first, please? Huh? Or thanks.
Yeah, I think I can provide a little bit of background to you guys on the Bonneville energy efficiency program, having been involved with that from the refineries end. You must remember that the whole purpose of that program is to subsidize energy efficiency projects that otherwise wouldn't get done. Right. And as a result of that, one of the rules they had was that they would not provide funding for any project that had already been approved. Right? They don't want to approve, they don't want to subsidize something that you're going to do anyway. That created a problem with the refinery and a bit of a catch-22. If the project is something like lighting or a variable speed drive, they are very familiar with those and can look at what you're doing and can generate a savings ahead of time so that you can put that into your economic analysis for the project itself. We ran into problems with a number of projects at the refinery that Bonneville was not familiar with. And so basically what they said is, we won't fund it until you put it in and show us how much it saves. So you wind up with a catch-22 that for things that are out of the ordinary, which Bonneville is not familiar with doing electrical energy efficiency projects in oil refineries, it becomes very difficult to come up with projects at the refinery that you can actually get funded through that program.
Thanks for the background. I see that Lauren Turner is on. I wonder, and it looks like Brian just unmuted, but I wonder if, when I did the refinery tour with Lauren, we talked a little bit about energy efficiency projects, and I wonder if perhaps we're due for a conversation. I know BPA has a whole industrial efficiency program. So, I don't know anything about it, but I do wonder if it's worth a conversation between BPA, PUD staff, and perhaps Lauren if she has time. But again, it's really up to our customer. Brian, did you?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow on with Rick's comments. Rick was absolutely correct. In the past, Bonneville operated as Rick suggested, but there's been a more recent policy shift. And I don't know if Lauren wants to comment, but in the recent project that we had that got funded for the refinery, the project was already completed and Bonneville funded it. We had to provide evidence of the project, but it was completed and then we got funding. So there has been a shift, at least in certain cases. The funding can follow the implementation of the project. And that's all I have.
We funded ahead of time, but they came back and they wanted us to verify the savings happened.
Sure, thank you,
Andrew
Ann.
Redding was, he missed his chance because he thought the meeting started at 9. Here's an article from today that you should be of interest to you all, and it's a link to an article from crosscut.com about FCC broadband service maps disputed at thousands of Washington locations.
Okay.
Sent to each of your.
Okay.
That's actually really good news, because I was concerned that the only county that was really looking at it closely was Whatcom County, because we had Andrew. And I'm actually very glad to hear that other people are contesting it, because we know what the flaws are in the data. We've looked at it. And for us, it was, there was enough pluses and minuses. It wasn't worth a challenge. But we suspected there was a lot of other problems. And I'm actually very glad that somebody's contesting it.
That's great. So that concludes public comment, and we have an executive session plan. And we're anticipating no action,
No action.
and we're going to be discussing potential litigation.
Which is sometimes.
That was a Freudian. That was a Freudian slip. There's really no politics involved with water rights.
And in some general litigation.
And general litigation. Great. So
Want to take 5 minutes?
Yeah.
so we have 5 minutes and start just before 10.
Thank you.
Back in
We-
session and closed.
Can I open a meeting again? Okay, so, I'm opening the Whatcom County PUD meeting again. We just completed executive session. There was no actions, taken. Thank you all for coming. This meeting is adjourned.